Whenever we've talked about Ukraine, we often talk about, well, look, if Ukraine ends in a certain way, then other people, other strongmen, other dictators might learn from Putin and think, well, actually, if I prepare my country for maybe a long-term sanctions regime to try and, sanction-proof my economy for at least so long and things like that, maybe I can go take some more territory, have some, short-term to medium-term, disadvantages to my country, but long-term, guess what? I gain territory. So there are a lot of consequences to that. And we're not just talking about other stuff that's going on in the world at the moment. Of course, as we've said, where Putin might go next in Europe, what's going on in the Middle East, probably directly responds to that as well, with Biden being unable to do rein Netanyahu in and stuff going on there, and Biden pretty much being a lame duck, mostly because of the US elections that are going on at the moment. That's its own sort of individual lesson, I suppose. But in Asia in particular, there are two very, very big flashpoints. First of all, you've got North Korea, who have been making some very, very worrying comments saying, oh, actually, there is no chance whatsoever Korea will ever be unified peacefully. It will only be unified by war. And we are taking that path to a point where we've had recently South Korea warning the world and even Ukraine saying, hey, look, there are North Korean troops operating in this war, helping out Russia, getting valuable military experience, quite a problem, quite a problem, on that front. But of course, Taiwan as well. Taiwan has become its own, independent democracy, entirely separate from China and its own, ideas of what it sees as democracy. And it should be something that we in the West should very much defend. And even though China and sort of the presidents have been very, very hesitant to fully say we are independent from China, really they've said it multiple times in all but name, we are independent from China. But of course, one of the things that people do worry about is what if China does reinvade Taiwan? There are going to be a lot of very, very big consequences around that worldwide for sure. But something else happened very recently, of course, around what Taiwan's president said, merely hinting at the idea that they might be independent already. And now China has conducted military drills, which have pretty much surrounded Taiwan, pretty much setting alarm bells off quite a lot in many, many places. So we should always bear in mind that certain events that happen in the world can have consequences that echo far, far further down the line, sometimes in unintended consequences we never could even predict or even imagine happening. But China invading Taiwan as a result of, maybe, quote, Putin's in massive quotation marks, successful invasion of Ukraine, taking territory from them, maybe that emboldens them to do something similar. But before we get on into this, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page, the donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee, the YouTube thank you button, and of course, as always, there is the Pony Club down below. So let's crack on then into this. So China conducts military drills around Taiwan in warning now to island's president. So the Chinese military and Coast Guard personnel have surrounded Taiwan's main island as part of now large-scale drills that was said to be a warning against, quote, separatist acts in the wake of a recent speech by the Taiwan's president. State media linked to Monday's drills to the National Day speech of last Tuesday by Taiwan's president Li Shangti, I think that's how you say it, in which he repeated that the People's Republic of China has no right to represent Taiwan. But he was also willing to work with it to at least maintain peace and stability. On Monday, the People's Liberation Army said that all branches of the military were now approaching Taiwan by sea and air, including in a strike group led by one of two China's active aircraft carriers, the Liaoyang. In joint drills now focused on sea and air combat readiness and even blockading key Taiwanese ports and areas, the assaults on maritime and ground targets said that the Eastern Theater Command spokesperson and senior captain Li Zi. The drill was served now to send a very stern warning to the separatist acts of Taiwan independence forces. At that very same time, the Chinese Coast Guard said it was now also separately to the military, but serves under that very same commanding body, announced, quote, law enforcement patrols around the main Taiwanese island, and illustrated that patrol paths encircling Taiwan's main island were described as, quote, a partial action to control the Taiwanese island in accordance with the law based on the One China principle. So you can see just by their very rhetoric and what they are doing here, this is, if you dare even say you are independent, we are going to blockade you. We are going to do this. And of course, bear in mind, there will be a US response should something serious like this actually happen. America would respond. Japan, would respond. There were a lot of people in Asia and other Asian countries who would respond to this provocation. This would be a NATO Article 5 situation, or should we say an OLAN military response on this. So it is one of those things. It is one of those things where we do really have to look at where China is like, no, Taiwan is ours. Taiwan is ours. Even though, really, when they've got like the rest of China, why are you so obsessed with China? With Taiwan, China? Just let it go already. But there you go. That's the insane one China policy for you right there. So, now described as, of course, a principal action to control the Taiwanese islands in accordance with the One China law. However, the ship tracking data seen by the Guardian did show that the Chinese Coast Guard did not track around Taiwan's now southern end. On Monday afternoon, the Beijing authorities did announce that 3 Taiwanese additions now to its sanctioned list of, quote, die-hard secessionists. These additions include Pom Shi, the legislator and co-founder of the Kuma Academy Civilian Defense Organization, Robert Cao Su, the Taiwanese billionaire who has funded civilian defense projects, including the Kuma Academy, and, of course, the Academy itself. The PLA did, of course, not say when these drills would end, but it did not announce any live fire or no-fly zones. Provided maps were showed at least 9 declared zones for the exercises, including at least 6 large areas near Taiwan's major ports. And remember on this is exactly what Putin did. Oh, these are just, they're just drills. They're just drills, guys. These are just large-scale military drills. Don't worry that, these things are, piling up near the border. Just ignore them, And of course, we all know what happened next in Ukraine. So we should be worried about this. Absolutely worried on that front. But, I think Taiwan is somewhere that, we should defend if it does be invaded, because it has its own democracy, it has its own culture, and that has developed from it being separate from Taiwan. And especially the Taiwanese are very aware what would happen, because look what happened to Hong Kong. In fact, that's what they all say. Why should we trust China when, look what happened to Hong Kong and look what's happening now to Hong Kong. I can't tell you enough, being part of JCI, how much Hong Kong, especially when you speak to some people in JCI, how that brings up some very, very strong feelings in and around a lot of that stuff there. So Taiwan's, of course, Mainland Affairs Council on Monday called these drills a blatant provocation and sent unanimously now regional peace and stability. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs called on Beijing to pull back from the brink of the precipice, while the President's office urged Beijing now to accept the goodwill offered in Li's speech. It said that Li had now convinced a national security meeting to respond, but Taiwan also deployed warships and planes and land-based radar systems now in response. In Washington, of course, officials from the Biden administration did urge Beijing to act with restraint, and they said that we're now monitoring these drills, that there was no justification for them after Li's routine speech. And that's obviously where these things happen, because you don't know if let's say China does these drills, maybe they feel, I don't know, provoked by a ship or something like that. You don't know what maybe minor incident could then spiral out of control and maybe, go into full scale war. You don't know. But this is one of those things of, by them doing these large scale operations almost out of the blue without almost any notice, this is when, China is sort of, trying to sort of flex its muscles, um, to bully Taiwan in this way. So on Monday afternoon, Beijing now stood by its actions, saying that Taiwanese independence and peace in the Taiwan Strait are now irreconcilable. And Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning told the regular press briefing. So bear in mind what she's just said there, that Taiwanese independence and peace in the Taiwan Strait are irreconcilable. So not only can Taiwan not have its independence, but you cannot have peace in that strait at all if that is what you support, if that is what you want. And yet, numerous times where you look at polling for data, people in Taiwan do not want to be part of China, especially since the years of what happened with the whole idea with Hong Kong, becoming even more slowly but surely being taken over, and all the idea of this one nation, um, you know, two two justifications or two principalities have been eroded completely over time. With China's Communist Party pretty much eroding all the rights slowly but surely, and you have seen a massive move of people moving from Hong Kong to other places. You've seen in the UK as well, something that's not actually talked about. One of the biggest actual um, immigration points has been from Taiwan over the past couple of years. Well, not Taiwan, Hong Kong over the past couple of years. So not a lot of people talk about. You don't see the Conservatives talking about that or anything like that. I wonder why, but yeah, there you go. It is one of actually the highest areas of immigration that's come from there. But there you go. So anyway, let's go back to this. So, of course, China's leader Xi Jinping claims that Taiwan, of course, is a Chinese province and has urged it to accept calls for what he calls peaceful reunification. But an overwhelming majority now of Taiwan's people and the People's Parliament reject the prospect of Communist Party rule, as I just said there. Overwhelmingly, they reject China's rule completely. Even more, as we said, if you look at how the polls were going, the second China took over Hong Kong, people were a bit wary, but since China's really been cracking down on the stuff in Hong Kong, they've seen what would happen to them, and they don't want that to happen to them as well. So as far as they're concerned, China should never Taiwan should never be under Communist Party rule, and they have made that very, very clear, to the point where you saw earlier that military school where they are actually actively encouraging people to be prepared to get military training should, in case an invasion ever happen, that you can be military prepared to resist against China. So Taiwan and the people of Taiwan, let me be very clear, have said it loud and very clear on numerous times, they do not want to be under China's rule. They are perfectly fine by themselves. China gains sort of nothing really from having Taiwan. It is just this whole obsessive one China sort of policy, which again is sort of driving this. This is very sort of nationalist from a Chinese point of view. As we said, nationalism turns out, guess what, can lead to some quite bad consequences. So very, very bad indeed. So, in response, of course, Beijing has now escalated military exercises and incursions now into Taiwan defense zone, as well as now collective technological and economic warfare. Mass disinformation campaigns and US intelligence now reportedly claims that Xi has now instructed the military to be capable of a full-scale invasion of Taiwan by 2027. And of course, we are rapidly closing in on that date. rapidly closing in on that. We are in 2024. It'll be 2025 next year. That's potentially 2 years away from that date. Might it come sooner? We don't know. But for China to be like, oh yeah, I want you to be ready for a full-scale invasion by this date, then just as prior to the recent, invasion by Russia of Ukraine, we should have been preparing, Ukraine a lot more. We should have been making sure that they were ready a lot more by having more of these weapons, by having most of this. Now, of course, Taiwan is a completely different situation at this moment. It does have its own sort of military complex. It has its own army that is a lot more sort of ready by sort of Western standards. It's been very, very much backed up by America. That, of course, what happens, bear in mind, if Trump gets in. Because if Trump gets in, 2027, that's when, of course, they're going to be there, So what's Trump's response going to be to that? Would he just allow China to take Taiwan? Lots of questions need to be asked there. So back to this. So Lian's, of course, National Day speech was seen by a lot of analysts as very restrained and, of course, more measured than even his May inauguration speech. So this is how tetchy China really got by this. When everyone else was looking at this speech, they were like, oh, actually, it was really restrained. And when you compare it to his inauguration speech, it was actually a lot less than he even said in that. So, writing for the Council on Foreign Relations, David Sachs said on Friday that if China were to react aggressively to it, then Lai may very well conclude, not even without reason, that there is now very little to be gained through any restraint and may embrace now even more explicit rhetoric on the cross-strait relations, which again, very true. I think he would absolutely do that. Because if you've gone, hey, we are independent, but we are quite happy to work with China for peaceful solutions, etc. And yet this is the way that China responds, even from what most analysts are saying was actually quite a calm, toned down speech. And yet this is the way China has responded. Yeah. What do you think is going to happen now in Taiwan? Well, certainly more Taiwanese are going to be certainly even more worried about China invading probably than ever before. So, as a lot of people have said, if China do invade, should they actually, somehow be successful, because, the Taiwan Strait is a big body of water to get across, maintain supply routes, etc. Actually taking and holding Taiwan may be a lot harder than they think, considering probably the amount of guerrilla warfare, resistance, and civilian resistance to them that they would encounter on this. So Monday's exercises, codenamed Joint Sword 2024B, had largely been expected by observers. Exercises named Joint Sword 2024A were, of course, launched after Lai's inauguration. The A suffix suggests that there will now be more to come this year. The PLA military now regularly runs drills for the last 2 years and have at least focused on an invasion blockade of Taiwan. Such military drills taken by substantial preparations are usually linked to a speech or an action by Taiwanese that Beijing does often find provocative. Military analysts have warned that each new set of drills has now demonstrated strategic escalation with the PLA's approach to Taiwan, even if there appears to now be less firepower. So, yeah, we should probably be very worried on this. Very, very worried by this. I said it before, escalation points. Taiwan is absolutely certainly one. But what if happens, let's say this happens, what if North Korea decides, it's time, boys, we're headed south? You could get two very big flashpoint conflicts very, very quickly, and you could end up with a very sizable war on your hands. A very sizable war indeed. So, we can only, of course, hope for peace, but in this case, China keeps on demonstrating that it would rather rattle the saber and prefer escalation and bullying tactics rather than the negotiating table. So, yeah, very bad time all around. But as I said, sometimes foreign policy, it's not all good. But as always, let me know what you think down below. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.